Hey, it's Tim here, that's me, hello. Miles Davis, ever heard of him? Well, if you've watched any of my videos ever, the answer is almost certainly yes. One of his signature tunes was called Solar. It was etched onto his gravestone. It was that significant. And the composition and performance and recording of was, a real testament to Miles. Except Miles didn't write Solar. Bet you couldn't see that coming from the title of the video. Okay, so Miles recorded Solar in 1954 and then never again, which is a shame because he played with some really hot bands. Luckily, folks like Bill Evans, Keith Jarrett, Pat Metheny, and tons more recorded amazing versions of the song. The song itself is a 12-bar form, fairly quick, mostly in a minor key. A lot of people consider it a minor blues. I am not one of those people, but that's a subject for a video in the future, so subscribe if you want to see it, which, yes, it means another video about Miles Davis. I'm sorry. So the song Solar doesn't get copyrighted until 1963. This is important because back then it was a separate step. These days, if you write a song down or record it, it's automatically covered under copyright. So this whole saga would have played out very differently if it happened today. So 50 or so years after the recording was copyrighted in 2012, it was a shock to many when a 1946 recording appeared in the Library of Congress. On that 10-inch acetate was a recording of a jam session led by the guitarist Chuck Wayne, and the song they played was eerily similar to Solar. It was titled Sunny, and it goes a bit like this. And to refresh your memory, here's Solar again. And let's go back to Sunny. And now Solar. Now this isn't a Katy Perry Flame situation. These are the same song, certainly from a melodic perspective. The Chuck Wayne version, harmonically, is very similar to an old jazz standard called How High the Moon, which would somewhat explain the title, Sun, Moon, although it was apparently also a tribute to Sonny Berman. But Miles buries this resemblance a little bit by changing the first chord from a C major 7 to a C minor major 7, which is quite a conspicuous chord, and so it really throws off the harmonic sound quite a lot. The melody, however, is almost identical. The rhythm is a little bit different, but that's about it. Okay, so thus far, everything we've talked about is observable fact, but it's once you start speculating on how this all came to pass, that things start to get a bit dicey. The worst case assumption is that Miles picked up a recording or a lead sheet or even just listened to Sonny playing the song, pinched it, and then called it his own. A more charitable but still possible version is that maybe Miles heard the song at a club and then it got into his head as a bit of an earworm, and then in a writing session a few years later it just came out inexplicably. Considering that one song is called Sunny and the other is called Solar, I find that pretty hard to believe, but you never know. Here's the problem though. This all falls into a much larger narrative about Miles Davis. There are a few fairly high-profile examples of Miles Davis being credited for other people's songs. Eddie Vinson is the classic example. The songs For and Tune Up were both written by Eddie, not Miles Davis, and yet they got Miles Davis's name attached to them. Another example is Blue and Green, which is one of the songs off Kind of Blue, and it's very possible that Bill Evans was in fact the composer or at least co-writer of that song, not Miles. But instead of trying to figure out what happened 60, 70, 80 years ago, I think there's a more relevant question, which is, does it matter? Music publishing is frankly just a weird business, and even in the best of circumstances can get murky with respect to authorship, especially when there's a lot of bodies in the room. Take the Beatles. Paul McCartney and John Lennon's songs were all published as Lennon-McCartney, but the two of them wrote separately most of the time. And jazz musicians were no exception to this weirdness. Sometimes they'd write alone, sometimes they'd write together, and sometimes songs just came out on the bandstand and maybe were finished up later. And often, band leaders would get the credit for a sideman's work. Sometimes it was malice, sometimes it was mistake, and oftentimes it was just marketing. And this is part of the reason why I think Miles gets particularly tough treatment in this regard. He was very cocky and very bold, yes, and it sort of fits the narrative that he was a bit of a song stealer. But Miles was also wildly successful, and that has two major effects as I see it. Firstly, there's that natural inclination to market the songs as written by the band leader, because well, Miles Davis was the star of the show. But secondly, Miles's success means that any little authorship contentions that for another musician may have been forgotten in time have the microscope put on them for eternity. In any case, I think the narrative of Miles Davis being a downright dirty song thief is pretty problematic, and there's an unfortunate but I think legitimate racial element to it as well. Historically, white performers have appropriated black music, indirectly or directly, but have been generally lauded and praised for it. Bands like the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, and performers like, of course, Elvis Presley have all played their part. But unlike many of his white contemporaries who are praised for their innovative reuse of existing material, Miles Davis never gets that benefit of the doubt, which I find a little bit troublesome. At the end of the day, we talk about these songs because of Miles Davis. We have these incredible recordings of these songs because of Miles Davis. We play For and Tune Up, not as much as we should, and Solar at jam nights across the world because of Miles Davis. Now that's not a perfect argument, and I don't pretend that it is, but it does go to show that two things that are seemingly contradictory can be true at the same time, and that's fine. Miles can at once have been an incredible force for change and an innovator in his art, and at the same time have not always been fully original, or have built his ideas off the ideas of those who came before him. But I don't think it's very controversial for me to say that that's how society moves forward, whether in art or economics. And honestly, if Miles Davis did steal the song Solar, I'm glad he did. Thank you for watching. Please like this video. Apparently, it's a good thing in YouTube's eyes. If you're not subscribed yet, then please do be subscribed. And if you'd like to watch another video about Miles Davis, here is one about how that gravestone that I mentioned earlier is incorrect and not anything to do with the authorship of Solar. It's interesting. You should click it or tap it. Okay, bye.